When the first Spanish explorers sailed to the New World in the late 15th century, several great civilizations already flourished in the Americas. The most advanced of these cultures developed in the region of southern Mexico and northern Central America, known as Mesoamerica. The region's inhabitants lived in villages and in cities filled with monumental architecture. Art, written language, extensive trade networks, and agriculture were vital aspects of the Mesoamerican cultures, as were the people's deeply held religious beliefs. When Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492, the population of Mesoamerica exceeded 25 million people. After the arrival of the Spanish explorers, the native population declined by 90% over the next century, due to warfare, European diseases carried by the Spaniards, and harsh treatment of the enslaved survivors. In this program, we will take a look at two of Mexico's most powerful early civilizations, those of the Maya and the Aztec. The Mayan civilization originated in southern Mexico about 2,600 years before the beginning of the Common Era and rose to prominence around CE 250, just as the Roman Empire was beginning to collapse in Europe. Mayan culture spread across the area that now includes Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize, as well as parts of Honduras and El Salvador. The ancient Maya were renowned for their spectacular murals, architecture, and carvings. Mayan interaction with other Mesoamerican civilizations resulted in a vibrant mingling of cultures. The Teotihuacanos were a group whose culture greatly influenced the Maya. Their city-state of Teotihuacan was the New World's earliest urban center. It was located in the Valley of Mexico, near today's Mexico City. Their people were farmers, traders, and artists, producing intricate ceramics, murals, and tools made of stone. The Maya and other Mesoamericans modeled their city-states, such as Palenque, after the structure of Teotihuacan. Mayan temples, palaces, and government buildings were located in the center of their cities. And as in Teotihuacan, these structures were built of stone that was often beautifully carved and painted. Most inhabitants of a Mayan city-state lived in simple structures that were clustered around the central district. Outdoor markets, much like this one, operated by Guatemalan descendants of the Maya, were held for people to buy and sell food and handcrafted items. One product sold in the markets was maize, or corn, which was the principal crop in Mesoamerica. In fact, maize is a grain that was first domesticated from wild grasses in southern Mexico around 7,000 years ago. Most maize was ground into flour and made into tortillas. Place. Today, only 4 survive. The rest were burned by the Spaniards after they conquered Mexico. because they believed the books to be dangerous and subversive documents. Religion and astronomy deeply influenced the daily lives of the Maya, determining even the design and placement of important buildings. Mayans believed that the world went through continual cycles of creation and destruction. Their beliefs offered explanations for the forces of nature and gave a sense of order to their lives. Their priests acted as mediators between the Maya and their gods. Mayan religion centered on ritual sacrifice to appease the gods and keep their world in balance. Ceremonial ball games, played on courts like this, were seen as contests between their mythical hero twins and the gods of death. Mayans believed that pleasing the gods would lead to long lives, good fortune, and plentiful harvests. Mayan city-states were ruled by kings who also sought to appease the gods. One goal in their frequent tribal warfare was to capture rivals for use as sacrificial offerings. They also competed for territory and trade, since trade was another key element of Mayan culture. Some Mayan city-states, such as Tikal in Guatemala, developed primarily as regional trading centers. Mayans occasionally used cacao beans as a form of money, but they mainly bartered such goods as salt, honey, carved jade, cotton, animal skins, and feathers. Archaeologists have unearthed macaw feathers from the Mayan region of Central America, among the ruins of the ancient city of Pueblo Bonito in New Mexico. Their discovery shows that the trading network of the ancient American civilizations extended over a vast area. By the 9th century, many of the greatest Mayan cities were abandoned as a result of drought, overpopulation, and warfare. As the Maya declined in power, a militaristic people known as the Toltec shifted from a nomadic lifestyle to a more settled urban way of life. In the 10th century, they established an empire in Mexico's central highlands, ruled from their capital city of Tula. Within the next 50 years, the Toltec replaced the Maya as the dominant civilization in Mesoamerica. However, during the 1300s, nomadic Chichimeque Indians and other invaders demolished the Toltec Empire and its capital city. While the Toltec Empire was collapsing in the Americas, Europe was in the midst of the medieval era, a time when nobles in castles sent knights into battle to defend their realms. Following the Toltec, the Aztec, or Mexica, were the next group that rose to cultural dominance in Mexico. They settled at Lake Texcoco, near the long-abandoned city of Teotihuacan. Aztec priests decided to build on that spot because of a strange omen they had seen there: an eagle perched atop a cactus, grasping a snake in its beak. Today, the Mexican flag commemorates this legendary event. The Aztecs considered themselves to be the divinely ordained successors of the Toltec. Building on the Toltecs' militaristic culture, they forged alliances with other tribes and fought a series of wars that led them to become the most powerful empire ever to exist in Mesoamerica. At its peak in the early 16th century, the Aztec Empire covered more than 80,000 square miles. Their capital city, Tenochtitlan, was a metropolis of towering temples, palaces, and broad avenues. The city was crisscrossed with canals, which were used for transportation and for irrigation. Nearly all the ancient canals were destroyed when the Spanish drained Lake Texcoco. But here, at Xochimilco, near Mexico City, some of them remain. Many modern-day descendants of the Aztec visit the canals for a day of fun, drifting among the colorful boats, enjoying a wide variety of music and tasty food. In Aztec times, lush gardens grew on artificial islands in Lake Texcoco, called chinampas. Nearly half the local food was raised on the chinampas. These products were sold in open-air markets attended by thousands of people. Gods associated with agriculture dominated the Aztec religion, and religion was the focus of Aztec life. For example, they worshipped a corn god, a rain god, and a god of fertility known as Xipe-Totec. In some native communities in Mexico, dancers known as the voladores still perform an ancient ceremony dedicated to Xipe-Totec. Their airborne ritual originated during a period when severe drought gripped the Aztec Empire. Back then, some young men decided to appeal to the god of fertility for help. In the middle of the village, they erected a tall pole, placing a small platform on top of it. Then, dressed in colorful costumes, they threw themselves into the air, floating like birds on the ropes attached to their legs, while one of them played sacred music as he spun. Each flyer twirled 13 times around the pole. These 52 revolutions represented the number of years in a century on the Aztec's sacred calendar. Legend says the voladores' flying dance pleased Xipe-Totec so much that he sent rain to save their crops. In addition to the gods of rain and fertility, the Aztec held the gods of the sun in very high esteem, for they believed that without them, there would be no life on Earth. One Aztec sun god, Tonatu, is pictured on this calendar stone. The Aztec year represented on it consisted of 18 months, each lasting 20 days. Calendars were essential to the Aztec way of life. They believed that certain days were especially favorable for such activities as planting seeds, building houses, or going to war. Aztec priests made offerings to the gods in the hopes that their tribe would be blessed with victories and bountiful harvests. Religious rites were usually performed in temples situated atop pyramids in the sacred districts of the cities. Throughout Mesoamerica, various cultures believed that the gods aided humans only if humans nourished them through religious offerings, including human sacrifice. For the Aztec, this practice was a key element in their religious ceremonies. Most sacrificial victims were captured in wars, but a few were volunteers who were honored and treated with great respect before their ceremonial deaths. While numerous kings ruled the Mayan city-states, the ancient Aztec were governed by a single emperor, whom they called the Great Speaker. In the spring of 1519, the Emperor Montezuma II learned that pale-skinned invaders had arrived from the east in giant canoes and had damaged several villages by throwing bolts of lightning at them. Montezuma feared this meant the plumed serpent god Quetzalcoatl was coming to Tenochtitlan to destroy the Aztec Empire. As it turned out, the invaders were led not by a god, but by a Spanish conquistador named Hernán Cortés. By August 13, 1521, a little more than 2 years after arriving in Mexico, Cortés, his soldiers, and their Native American allies accomplished the seemingly impossible by overwhelming and then destroying the huge Aztec Empire. The conquistadors established Mexico City, the capital of the enormous colony of New Spain on the ruins of Tenochtitlan. The Spaniards believed that it was their duty as Christians to erase all traces of the native religions of Mexico. So they executed the Aztec priests and demolished their temples. The Spanish eventually converted most Mesoamericans to Catholicism. The native people were forced to give up much of their unique culture in exchange for the beliefs of the Spanish colonists. In 1547, A massive epidemic of smallpox, a disease carried by the Spaniards, swept across the land. The Native Americans had little natural immunity to the illness, and more than 90% of them died. With the death of so many native people, the culture of Spain spread with little resistance. By the late 16th century, the colony of New Spain had expanded northward into what is today the U.S. state of New Mexico. And by the 1780s, the colonists of New Spain were well established in Arizona, California, and Texas as well. Today, New Spain is only a distant memory, but the explorers, priests, and colonists who participated in its founding are remembered for the radical changes they made in world history by introducing their European culture to the native people of the Americas. The Aztec and the Maya who came before them are remembered for establishing two of the earliest and most influential civilizations in Mesoamerica. They are also remembered for their numerous accomplishments in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and the arts, as well as for the many rich cultural traditions that are carried on by their descendants today.